So we were kind of sharing roles. It was a little difficult, I must say. This is my first time to have to sing and try and play drums at the same time. Well, not to give an excuse, but we are just a very small group of our members. But I guess I'm running it now. I thought maybe a lot of things, I think probably Tom already mentioned, and some of the others already mentioned various things. I'm Rick Emmert, and I'm the artistic director of Theatre Nohgaku, and I'm willing to take any questions if you have. Yes, please.
As a company of creators, co-creators who looks like you all have day jobs that take you from different
yes.
parts of the world, how often and for how long each time do you meet to work together? Is it based on the fact that you have played a performance that you're preparing for, or do you train together? What sorts of, as a company?
Well, actually, that's exactly what it is. You pretty much answered it. When we have performances, we get together for rehearsal sessions for that. We have had various residencies with several or more of our members to work on a play that we're still not quite ready to do, but the first time we're working through it. We've also, up until about 2 years ago, almost all the members here had regularly attended. Elizabeth still, oh no, she was out there. Elizabeth and I ran well, it's based in Elizabeth's, with her theater company in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, in the USA. And the two of us ran a no training project for 20 years. And it was then that a lot of these people started coming together, and kind of the ones that stayed on have become a part of Theatre Nohgaku. So we had that training for a long time. Now it has changed just a little bit, but we've also had more performances. Before, when we were having that training, we would always add an extra week at the end, and what we would call TN, Theatre Nohgaku Week, where after the training, we would work on the Theatre Nohgaku performances. So some of us were there for 4 full weeks. Then now, however, we've had over the last couple of years several different performances, and usually before those performances, we figure out the logistics for getting together for the people who are going to be in that performance. We also do a lot with internet, putting materials on the internet for just our company members to learn anything new. For example, if we did get together, but some people weren't there, this is what we were singing, this is the way we sang it. And so we're struggling in that regard, but exactly, we are a company that now we have our members in 4 different countries. Laura is from London, and we have one from Canada. Other than that, it's Japan and the US. And I would say that a number of members come to Japan from time to time, and so that's another reason that we get together, and I run a no training project in Tokyo, and so sometimes people come for that. So yes, but it is a struggle.
Can I just quickly add that many of us also have private lessons in various aspects of note as well as training together. Perhaps that goes without saying, but just wanted to add that.
Yes, that's a very good point, that those who have come to Japan have taken lessons from various Japanese master teachers, and that includes in the instruments as well too. And so there are several of us who are based in Japan and it's an ongoing process in that regard. Yes?
So the masks are not acoustically transparent, obviously. And so my question is there an aesthetic to the sound of the mask, or is that something to be overcome, or how does that work into the performance?
You know, various people say different things. Sometimes people say, you know, it doesn't affect the sound that much. but other people will explain that the utai and the way it is chanted and the intensity of the utai is made so it kind of more or less pierces the mask. And so, I mean, some people have tried examples where you have like an opera singer puts a mask on, and how does that affect them? But for a no singer, and the intensity that one brings to utai, or the chant, some people will say that. There are various people who say different things about that. Yes?
Given how the nature of the English language is very different from Japanese, right? What is the consideration that goes into like adapting a play from Japanese to English? Considering the fact that you have to do the dynamic style, and like I feel like, for example, in Japanese, like the words sound a bit more rounded sometimes, so or like basically it just sounds different. So how does that? How do you translate that into like the English language to, be able to express that same dynamic style?
Well, first of all, when we talk about translation, I'm not sure that's what you mean, because the only piece that we did today was the very first piece. Sumidagawa is one that was actually translated from Japanese, and we do in English. But then the other pieces, and most of our repertory is really pieces that were created in English. But if you're talking about translation in terms of the style of chant, I think, there are a number of people who say, well, of course, the characteristics of English and those of Japanese are different. There are certain things you have to do in Japanese that you don't have to do in English, and vice versa. For example, in English, we often end a syllable with a consonant. And so the consonant has to end, you have to put that extra bit, and actually that takes a certain intensity. I mean, book, you have to say that, like boo instead. You don't want that to be the case. Probably not boo. But as you can see, there are things about that. So I think as a company, we've also struggled a little bit with trying to make sure that the English is understandable. The Japanese here who have seen No, and perhaps don't see it a lot, but who've seen No, I think Japanese who are first exposed to No in Japanese don't really understand. It's very difficult. You only understand individual words. And that has to do with the complexity of the text, but also the complexity of the sound and how that is made. So we have gone back and forth on, well, not really. I think we as a company have moved toward trying to make what we sing fairly understandable. So, but how can we also make it utai-like? And I must say, when I first started writing No in English, the very first time I had just singers who were in Tokyo, foreign singers who could speak, could sing in English. And so we did this, but if you know some Japanese, the word uta means song, and utai for what we use for No means chant. And so I always like to say that the first times it sounded more like uta and not utai. And so how do you make that transition? And that's pretty much why I started doing a sort of a training project to bring in foreigners, and Japanese have joined us as well too, but to really have training. And I should add that our training is pretty much all in Japanese. So when we train, we first of all sing a lot of No in Japanese. All these people have sung more Japanese probably than English. Then, though, we're making that transition, and that's what we're attempting to do now. Yes?
First of all, I'd like to deeply thank you for sharing with us your such a high level of understanding of Japanese performing arts, and such a high level of performing this. And I've been, and we have been all simply impressed by outstanding and stunning performers. What I'd like to ask you, and I'm interested in hearing from each one of you briefly, how and when and where you first came across the performing arts of No, and probably mesmerized by that and decided to learn it. Thank you.
I was directing, I work in Western theater. My profession is as an actor in Western theater. I received a grant through the Japan-US Friendship Commission, and I was able to go to Japan for 6 months to study traditional Japanese theater, and that's when I encountered Rick Emmert and his class, and I loved it, but when I think back on what was it that I just ached for, I think it was the music. Something about the music, the power of that music was so, it just struck a deep chord, and when I got back home to the United States, I missed it. I wanted to connect with what that brought up in me again. So I think that would be my answer.
I was attracted to the rigor of the training. I was attracted to the fact that it was all-encompassing of the body and the voice and the imagination and the text and the poetry. I was astonished at the, well, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but I went to Japan in 1990 looking for experimental dance because I was really interested in the Butoh movement, and discovered that there wasn't a lot, I couldn't find much that was really serious. But when I wandered into a No play, having no idea what I was looking at, I was kind of stunned. I didn't think I would ever go again, but I knew that I was in the presence of something really remarkable with those performers. And so when I had a chance 10 years later to come back to Japan, that's the first thing I looked for.
I was an actor in New York City for a number of years, and I worked with a lot of people with large egos, and I would get in lots of fights. And also I've been doing theater since I was a young boy, and so when I would go see theater, often I would understand what I was seeing. It didn't matter what country or what language. But when I saw No for the first time in New York City, I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't believe that the piece of paper that they handed me was actually the same thing that was happening on the stage. So that intrigued me, and then I started to study it, and then the ego thing happened, where this is really, well, first it's a form where the ego is shed, right? There's no curtain call. The main actor is wearing a mask, so you can meet him afterwards, and you wouldn't know. You know, it's not about look at me, look at me, look at me. It's a communication that's happening on the stage. It's a transference of energy, and this theater is lovely too because we're surrounded on 3 sides, and the traditional stage is surrounded on 2 sides. So you usually have the chorus on one side, musicians in the back, and the main players in the center, and the audience on 2 sides. So all 4 sides are, you know, it's here and now in the present, in the present. It's also all of the crafts are by hand. There's no digital anything. We don't use microphones. We don't really use lighting. We have to use lighting because we're indoors, but I really like the fact that it's people power, all people power, especially in this day of digital everything.
Gee, for me it was 40-some years ago. I kind of forget. What I do like to say is that it was by chance that I was going to be well, I was in a seminar in a college in the United States about No. That didn't necessarily convince me that this is absolutely what I wanted to do. But when a play that we had done over there, it was decided to do it here, and I was asked if I would direct the music, I said, well, yeah, but I better study the real thing. And so that's kind of where I went, and then it became an issue of, first of all, movement and singing, and then always going, and that to me was even more important than story. And I teach Japanese students now, and I tell them when I'm taking them to No for the first time, I said, you should probably be like me, because I had an advantage. I knew I wasn't going to understand the Japanese, so I had to look at other things to find appreciation. And I try and do that with my students. Sometimes it works, most of the time it does not. They come back and say, but I didn't understand anything. What did I tell you? But, so, that's sort of what it is.
I came primarily from an academic background. I got a PhD in Greek literature with a major interest in Greek tragedy, and it was through reading about Greek tragedy that I sometimes came across references to know as being similar, highly stylized theater using mask, chorus, and it intrigued me, and I thought that I'd like to get to know about No someday. And I finally had an opportunity. I had a colleague who was a Japanese teacher who had videos of No plays, and I borrowed those from her. The first play I watched was Goromo, which many of you probably know that play. And I was watching the video with a book that had a translation on one page and then Romanized Japanese on the other page, and it goes so slow that I could follow the Japanese sounds and understand from the translation what was going on. And the story about an angel who comes down to earth, and she leaves her feathered cloak on a pine limb, strolling along, enjoying wonderful spring weather, and a fisherman comes along and makes off with the cloak, and the angel's voice appears and says, "What are you doing? Without my cloak, I can't fly back to heaven and I'll perish." And the fisherman, being a gruff old sort, doesn't want to give it back, and the angel's literally melting before his eyes, and he still won't give it back, but she finally persuades him. And as I was watching that at the moment when there was the standoff, I just started crying because the angel was about to be destroyed, and the fisherman, if he destroyed the angel, would be reborn in a lowly existence and never get to enlightenment. It was so sad. But why did I start crying? Well, because the energy of those two characters, merely standing on stage facing each other, was so powerful. And I also came from a background in dance. I took ballet for many years, and I love performing arts, music, theater, dance, and I was exposed to quite a few performing arts from around the world. But when I saw that, I just thought, this is the most emotionally expressive art I've ever seen. I want to learn as much as I can about it. And then I had the good fortune to meet Rick Emmert here. Found out he teaches not only about No, but how to perform it. And through my interest in dance, I wanted to go and start studying with him. I wanted to move on stage like those actors, that beautiful movement. But the more I studied, the more I realized it's an art form in which all the elements work together. Any one member of the cast has to understand what everyone else is doing in order to work together to create that energy and emotive power. And well, that's been the journey that's got me to here.
I actually have my own microphone. I haven't had to pass it on to anyone. There are two moments I think for me that got me hooked on No. The first was at a short summer course in Reading University in the UK. When I heard Rick sing Utai for the first time. I'm a singer who's quite obsessed with melodies and where speaking ends and singing begins, and this was sort of a new style to add to my collection of styles. And then I heard the Nohgaku for the first time, and that was another sort of voice that I hadn't heard before and I found quite interesting. Then seeing a whole No for the first time when I first went to Japan, I went to the Kansei No Theatre and I saw what most people would consider quite a long, depressing No play called Moto Mezuka. It's about suicide, basically. And became more fascinated. And then it was only after that that I started to realise that most of the stories from No are traditional folk tales or traditional medieval warrior stories, stories that I'm really interested in other cultures as well. And the way that No plays with different traditional narratives is another thing that keeps me interested in it. I could go on.
Thank you for the performance and thank you for the wonderful stories of how each of you arrived at the form. Most of the questions have been about form, but I have a question about the content. There's a tension between the form and the content that you're always working with. Choice of Elvis Presley is sort of partly historical, partly folk, and also partly mythological. The question though is, in performance, what is the expectation for the audience's reaction, purely from a content perspective? So I noticed the code shift when you were talking about the women and the fans are all, clawing and pulling at the character, but all of you were carrying fans, and I thought that was hilariously funny, like a visual fun, but I was too scared to laugh. So the question, how does an audience react to your piece?
It varies. The first time we did a piece of it was for a group of about 25, 20-something-year-olds who were doing ironic New York City theater. And so they thought, oh yeah, Elvis, no, totally cool. And we're ready to laugh at the drop of a hat. So the very first line, my name is Judy and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, that was a laugh riot. Like, the place exploded in laughter. And we've all been doing it for so long, like that's called an anori. It's just a name announcement. It's not funny at all. So we weren't expecting any laughter. And so we're like, oh my God, what are we in for? So, but as it went on, and people were like, oh my goodness, this is sincere. I mean, much of American experimental theater now is ironic and tongue-in-cheek, but there was nothing tongue-in-cheek about this. This is really plunging the depths of loneliness. We won them over, and by the end, they were quite sad. And this was pre-mask. We hadn't even had a mask yet. But it's an issue. It always is an issue. Every time we do it, there's a little bit of laughter, and I like it. It's good. I'm glad that people are engaged enough. But usually by the second act, the laughter has then subsided.
There has consistently been a laugh about 33 movies, most of them bad. That has always been a place where the audience chuckles, but usually it's a recognition and not like it doesn't release it, it's more of a, by then they're kind of, with us. But I never thought of the fan thing. That never, never even occurred to us. And sometimes the mention of a cheap motel will get a chuckle too, but usually you can feel that hypnotic power that No has, and particularly what the food does to kind of pull you in, that wins over sooner or later, sometimes later.
Just one extra thing I want to say is that the form is difficult. So if it's a story that is complicated, then the audience can get lost. And so with Elvis, everyone has an experience or a feeling or has heard of him. So they're already like, okay, I know Elvis. So you don't really have to follow the story. You know it already. But it happens a lot also, like in Japan and Kyogen, these two characters, Taro Kaja and Jiro Kaja, Japanese people know that they're clowns. And so you're, oh, okay, these are the comic characters. They know that part already. So I thought at first, when we first heard about it, Elvis, we were a little bit trepidatious, but when we thought hard about it, it's actually quite perfect because it's a door already open, and then the form can carry it through.
I'm afraid that we've kept you so long, we must ask for just one more question.
Can I ask you for the conceptualization of the costume? Because, for example, in the first act, they are very, jeans, kimono, and then the guy has, and then, so there's no relationship, I thought, with Japan. But then when Elvis enters at the end, I saw a reference to Japan, and then it's Elvis. So I was very confused with the costume.
So this is Kamishimo. So this is kind of based on the real traditional.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and we have this is TCB. This is his home. Yeah. So taking care of business was his big in a flash. Right? Taking care of business in a flash. So we went to a costume maker in Kyoto, Sasaki-san, And we said, so would you be interested in making an Elvis costume? And he was pretty taken aback by the whole thing.
No, we actually said, I'm actually a great Elvis fan.
Right, so at first he was taken aback because he couldn't conceive of what he would do, but the reason he was for it is because he was a fan. And so we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth over a number of months discussing the concept. And so we came up with the idea of a blues man for the first act. When the playwright Deborah Vore, when she wrote the piece, the first act was written, and it just said in the character descriptions, black man.
Black actor.
Yeah, and so there's no mention of him being black in it at all. And so, considering the delicacy, certainly in America with race at the moment and identity, we chose not to have a mask. But the more we've done the piece, the more we realize that the first act is really about identity and about his borrowing, stealing culture, black culture from gospel music and then the blues. So we approached the mask maker we work with all the time, Kizawa Hideta, and asked him. And so this mask is actually modeled after Delta blues musician Robert Johnson. And then it worked so nicely with this. Yeah, and then we didn't want it to be completely Japanese because it's not a Japanese story. But we wanted it to, if we didn't have this stuff, a lot of this movement, you notice, right? We have our arms out like this. If there's no sleeve, if there's nothing here, it's quite empty. So to give the girth to the character, we used some of the Japanese elements, like the pants as well, yeah. And then with the mask, and then the other problem, of course, is in Japan, it's either a black wig or something, but the black wig I used in the second act wouldn't work with this, and certainly not going to use an afro. So we came up with the hat idea.
So I get it now. It did anything that made him so lonely. I get that.
I think I would only add that, costume, I think, is probably the most difficult thing each time we come to a play. How are we going to costume this? It is and as John just mentioned, we do a lot of movements which are more or less based on the fact that you have sleeves. And so sometimes we can kind of do something with a kind of a Western costume that is sort of a sleeve-like affair. So mask is something we can do, and we have a good mask maker who has worked with us, and we feel that we can come up with something in terms of mask. But in terms of costume, that usually is the most difficult thing that we come up with. This time, our costume, in fact, there's something it's quite, Japanese. But at the same time, there's a hade, what do we call it, sort of a showy aspect to particularly the second half of Elvis. Very Japanese, at the same very showy, even in terms of And we made that connection, I think, in our minds. But, I think each step we go, each piece we come to, and who knows, if we ever, when we stage it again in a different way, maybe it will go a different way. I mean, we're not, No is 650 years old. I don't think it's a tradition that was done 650 years ago and everyone's done it the exact same way since. We know that's not the case. Things change over time. It's not a tradition that you absolutely do the same as always. So tradition changes. People interpret things in different ways. And costume certainly is one of the ways that, in fact, there's a fair amount of freedom in one sense. I'm not going to go into that right now, but we'll stop. So are we...
Maybe one last question, otherwise...
one more last question. Okay.
You need one? Otherwise we
there
can...
were a couple people over here who had something...
Yeah.
No? You don't want to end, you don't want to have the last question.
Yeah, no.
Okay, I think maybe we should send the unanswered question. Yes. Thank you very much. I think we'll stop here.